My new book, Awake, Observe, Shape, Transform, is now available on Amazon, along with the 90-Day Transformation Journal. You'll find a link to these things in the episode description. Also, if you'd like to support this work, there are $10, $15, and $20 Patreon tiers with no locked content, just a way to say I value this. You can also visit the site and check out the growing merch store, shirts, tanks, hats, and learn about one-on-one sessions with me by clicking the About button. And don't forget, the YouTube page has the podcast and binaural beats for meditation, rest, and sleep. Thank you for being here. Let's get started. Welcome to the Infinite Spark of Being podcast. My name is Keith Welsh, and today I want to talk to you about a woman from upstate New York who changed the way an entire generation thought about reality. And she did it from her living room. She didn't start a cult. She didn't wear a robe. She didn't build a retreat center, live in the jungle. She just sat down, lit a cigarette, closed her eyes, and channeled a non-physical being named Seth. Seth spoke at length about the nature of consciousness, the illusion of time, and how our beliefs create our reality. And I know right now some of you are already squinting your eyes and you're thinking, channeling, are you serious? But yes, I am serious. I discovered the Seth material about the same time that I started the Infinite Spark of Being blog back in the early 2000s. The material just rang true to me. I didn't know much about channeling at the time, but I started finding videos of this woman, Jane Roberts, channeling Seth. It was weird. It was spooky. I loved it. But again, the information was just true for me, right? I don't know how else to say it. Now, whether or not Jane was channeling this being is neither here nor there. It doesn't matter when you're receiving information that is this on point. And remember, back then this stuff wasn't everywhere. The things Jane was channeling were radical. There wasn't a TikTok to monetize. There wasn't a YouTube channel to grow, right? There was no clout chasing. People weren't famous for this stuff. This goes back to what I've said in the past. You can't look at this stuff through today's lens. You have to take yourself back to the time that this person lived, and it was the 1960s for Jane Roberts. But what Jane Roberts brought through in those sessions wasn't vague spiritual fluff that you hear coming out of the mouth of some girl on TikTok with dreadlocks and face tattoos because her trust fund will keep her from ever having to get a job. It wasn't flowery affirmations or empty promises. The Seth material is one of the most coherent, grounded, and psychologically sharp bodies of metaphysical teachings I've ever come across. And even if you think channeling is all bullshit, which personally I typically do, the content itself stands up. You don't have to believe in the method to benefit from the message. You know, maybe these people aren't channeling some other. Maybe they're just tapping into the collective unconscious. And since they're inhabiting a meat body that requires an ego to survive, the reality testing function of that ego tells them that they are separate from the thing that they're channeling, that they're communicating with some other thing. So today we're going to talk about Jane Roberts. We're going to talk about the history of channeling. We're going to explore the Seth material and how it intersects with other spiritual systems. And finally, we're going to ask, what does this mean for you? Is this something you can actually use, or is it just another one of those big if true ideas that you hear once, think about it for a second, and then forget it? So let's get into it. Channeling reality, Jane Roberts, Seth, and the birth of New Age wisdom. Jane Roberts was born in 1929 in Saratoga Springs, New York. Her early life was tough. Her father was abusive. Her mother was mentally unstable and addicted to pills. So Jane grew up learning how to survive in chaos. And like a lot of kids in chaotic households, she developed a deep inner world. She wrote poetry, she painted, she explored ideas, but she also had weird experiences. trance-like states, dreams that felt more like visitations, voices, images, visions. She didn't grow up in a spiritual community. This wasn't Sedona. This wasn't Bali. This was Depression-era upstate New York. So she eventually went to college for art and writing. She published a few short stories, married a man named Robert Butts. He was an artist, real quiet guy, very supportive. And they settled into a pretty simple life in Elmira, New York. They were broke. They lived in a small apartment. They were just two creative people trying to figure out. Then, in 1963, Jane got a book deal to write a book about ESP, extrasensory perception. As part of her research, she picked up a Ouija board. Not to contact the dead, not to play games, just to see what might happen. And what happened changed everything. Now, I'd like to stop here and just mention that Ouija boards were sold by Milton Bradley. They were considered a game. They didn't invent the technology, of course, and yes, it is a technology. It's a spiritual technology, but they sold it, packaged it, and marketed it. I myself have played with one many times in my life, and as far as I can tell, this shit's real. This was something you could buy anywhere games were sold. You know, for a long time in our culture, the paranormal was part of our life. Whether it was folk magic, superstition, or whatever, there was a belief in something other than this. So this idea isn't strange, but with the obsession with the material world, status, stuff, social media, and its comparative culture that is killing the joy of contentment with a simple life, we're seeing the disappearance of the other with a capital O. So back to Jane Roberts. Well, during one of their Ouija board sessions, the planchette, that's the pointer that's used, started moving all over the place and spelling out these very coherent sentences. And the sentences were intelligent, and sometimes they were very philosophical. The entity on the other end, guiding the pointer, described itself as Seth. Not a ghost, not an angel, not a demon, just Seth. So pretty soon, Jane didn't need the board anymore. She just began speaking the messages aloud. She would go into a light trance, and Seth would speak through her. And it wasn't in some dramatic, eyes rolling back horror movie way. She stayed seated, she smoked, sipped a beer, but her posture would change. Her voice would shift, and the cadence, the rhythm became different, became deliberate, direct, intelligent. Seth described himself as a personality essence no longer focused in physical reality. In other words, a consciousness that once experienced being human and now existed in another layer of reality, outside of time, outside of space, but still very much alive. So over the next 21 years, Jane channeled more than 1,500 sessions. Many of them got recorded. They transcribed them and published books like the Seth Materials, Seth Speaks, The Nature of Personal Reality, and some other ones. But what emerged from those sessions was a complete metaphysical system, coherent, internally consistent, and deeply practical. So, what did Seth actually teach? Well, at the heart of the Seth Material is one statement. You create your own reality. Not in a poetic way, not in the way people say when they're trying to cheer you up, but in a real way. Seth meant it literally. Your beliefs, whether they're conscious or unconscious, generate your experience of the world. What you expect to see, you will see. What you fear, you will feed. What you assume to be true becomes true for you. He said, you form the fabric of your experience through your own beliefs and expectations. Your beliefs form your reality. Your beliefs are like colored lenses in your glasses. They affect how you see the world and what you see in it. He described the self as multidimensional, not just past lives, but probable selves. Different timelines, choices you didn't make, versions of yourself living out other possibilities. He said time doesn't really flow from past to future. He said that it's all happening simultaneously. You're like a radio tuner dialed into one frequency, but you could change the dial anytime. And not just moving forward, but shifting sideways. Now remember, this was before we were talking about this kind of shit. They weren't like quantum physics wasn't in everybody's face. Quantum computing stuff wasn't really there. I don't even think quantum computers were invented in the 60s. This wasn't common knowledge. There was no internet. You couldn't just follow a hashtag and fill your algorithm with this kind of shit. But what Seth described was that the world was like a projection. Not an illusion exactly, but like a symbolic translation of your inner state. That matter is a kind of language that your soul speaks to you with. That every person in your life, every event is a mirror. He also emphasized free will. Seth wasn't fatalistic. He didn't say, you planned everything before you were born and now you just got to act it out. He said you were co-creating your life constantly, moment by moment. And your point of power, this is important, is always now. The point of power is now. The point of power is one of those actionable ideas in the Seth material. It means that even if you've been stuck in the same pattern for 30 years, even if your beliefs were shaped by trauma or bad parenting or cultural programming, you can shift it now because you are the projector. You are not the screen. Now, let's take a brief step back a little bit because Jane Roberts wasn't the first person to channel a non-physical being. This isn't new. Channeling or spirit communication shows up in every spiritual tradition. The oracles of Delphi in ancient Greece would go into trance states and receive messages from Apollo. In West African spiritual traditions, mediums, they channel ancestral spirits. In Tibetan Buddhism, the Nyung oracle enters a trance to deliver prophetic insights. In Christianity, the prophets spoke, they spoke about God speaking through them, right? Muhammad channeled the Quran through the angel Gabriel, which I think is the Muslim version of Gabriel. In Judaism, Moses receives the law on Mount Sinai, right? A channeling experience. Even in Hinduism, the rishis who heard the Vedas were receiving cosmic truth, not composing it. This is something very important. The Vedas weren't composed. They were channeled. Joseph Smith, Book of Mormon. Anyway, in the 19th century, the rise of spiritualism brought seances and table tipping and automatic writing. People like Helena Blavatsky, Alice Bailey, Edgar Cayce, they all laid the groundwork for this New Age movement through their own forms of channeling. So when Jane Roberts started speaking as Seth, she was stepping into a long lineage of people who opened themselves to something bigger than themselves. But what made Jane's work so unique was its clarity, its structure, its ground. It was just so grounded. She wasn't putting on a show. And you can see that when you watch these videos of her. There's something, man, listen, I've seen all the channeling shit. All of you that have ever sent me anything, just know I've seen it. And if you have sent me something, I've probably responded with, oh yeah, I've seen this guy. I don't know, man. Jane is just real. I'm going to cover some other channelers, I believe, in the future, but Jane was the one because that was the first thing that I ever really saw, right? And the thing about Jane Roberts, because again, you look at it through this lens of the 21st century, but remember, she wasn't selling crystals, right? She wasn't doing it for fame. She and Rob were just trying to understand what the fuck was coming through. Right? And they wanted to document it as accurately as possible. It was like, oh my God, what is this thing? Okay, we got to write it down. Right? And I think it's interesting when that gets lost on our generation because we're so like, how can I make a buck off this? How can I monetize it? They were just trying to document it, right? They made very little money. They didn't create a brand. They didn't lead seminars or certification programs. They were just doing the work. And that to me gives it a lot of weight. They were just there writing it down. So what do we do with this? How are we supposed to use this? How does a 21st century human being with bills to pay, a job to go to, and all this fucking emotional baggage apply this to their real life? Well, here's how. You start with your beliefs. Right now, think about an area of your life where you feel stuck, where something is just, it's not moving. And this might be money. It could be a relationship. It might be the way you see your body. It could be some reoccurring thought pattern that you can't shake. And then ask yourself, what do I believe about this? Not what you want to believe, but what you actually believe. Maybe you believe you're not worthy of love, right? Maybe you believe that money is hard to earn. Maybe you believe that your body is broken. Maybe you believe that life is unfair. And then don't argue with those beliefs. Just look at them. Just hold them up, have them in your awareness, and just look. Because Seth taught that awareness is the first step, right? You don't know what you don't know. Seth said that once you can see a belief clearly, you can begin to loosen your grip on it. And once you loosen your grip on it, you make space for something new. You can try this. Write down the belief that's limiting you, then write its opposite, right? But then kindly and gently begin to entertain the opposite as a possibility. You don't have to fake it, just kind of make room for it. And say it to yourself. Not like a lie, but like an invitation, right? I am open to the possibility that I am worthy. I am open to the possibility that healing is available to me. I'm open to the possibility that abundance is perfectly natural. That's all. That's where it starts. Now, maybe this whole thing feels like a stretch to you. I get it. Maybe you're not sure if Jane Roberts was really channeling some interdimensional being. Maybe you just think she was accessing her subconscious mind in a creative way. Fine. I don't need you to believe in Seth. I just need you to consider this. What if your reality is really a mirror? What if your life is responding to your beliefs and not your wishes? What if your assumptions are more powerful than your actions? And if that's even partly true, then doesn't it make sense to start examining the beliefs that are shaping your world? Doesn't it make sense to take some kind of ownership of the lens that you're looking through? Because if you are the projector, you can change the film. And if you are the radio, you can change the station. And if you are the creator, then you're not a victim. You're not stuck. You're not just hypnotized by your own thinking. And it's time to wake up. I love you. Stay awake. Thank you. If the infinite spark of being has brought you any value, consider supporting the work. And you can do that by checking out Awake and the 90-Day Transformation Journal, both now available on Amazon. The links are in the description. If you want to support this work on a monthly basis, there are $10, $15, and $20 Patreon tiers that have no locked content yet, just support. You can also swing by the website, check out the merch store, learn more about working with me one-on-one, and as always, the YouTube page has full episodes as well as binaural beats to help you with your practice. So I'll see you next week. Thank you, and I love you.